All right, welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today with me we have Jim Marshall. He's a human development engineer, but he's also the creator of something called Septemics. And so, welcome, Jim. Thank you for coming. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and what Septemics is? So I know I'm going to
Okay,
keep messing it up.
okay. Well, the first thing I should say is that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book Septemics Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique. And between them, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty that anyone has regarding people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
Nice. And looking at your bio, you have a lot of, I think you said you're like a polymath. So you have multiple degrees and a wide range of topics. So what led you to this more human development side versus I think you had like engineering and you did have psychology and some parapsychology, but a lot of it was more science focused, I guess, not as much as people focused in the beginning.
Right. So, what was the question?
What led you down this path to go into this more human development mode of
Okay.
thinking?
Okay. So, really, the story begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering the physical things, such as airfoils and motors and gears and electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because that is the area that is most mysterious, most unknown, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably.
Hmm.
95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand the next door neighbor. This is a huge problem that everybody has. And Septemic solves that across 35 axes. So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, bringing engineering tactics, engineering strategies, engineering ideas, engineering procedures, engineering devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to human development. So I worked on hundreds of different people. All of them improved as a result of working with me. Incidentally, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session.
Hmm.
I never told that to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became obvious to me that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. Now, this happened many thousands of times over a 40-year period. I would guess maybe 8,000, 9,000 times. And every time it happened, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew absolutely nothing about how I was doing what I was doing.
Hmm.
All they knew was they came to me with a problem or a situation or an upset or an unwanted condition. And they said, "Can you help me with this?" And I said, "Yes." And I did. So the insights that they had. They all had insights. Oh, now I see why I can't get along with my father. It's because of boppity 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 bop. See? So they were very specific to the person.
Mm.
They were not specific to what I was doing. Nobody ever figured out what I was doing. But through the decades, I made notes. And by 1995, I had actually observed and recorded about 32 scales. Now, you have to realize after I would see this in the session, I would then go out in the real world and I would see exactly the same phenomena in people that I wasn't even talking to. Like I go to Walmart and I see two guys talking. I say, oh, they're at that level. See? And again, that verifies it. See, this is very strong scientific information because there's no chance of a placebo effect
Mm.
and there's no power of suggestion. I never suggested anything to anyone with my clients. Even if they asked me directly, which would have been a very rare thing, I would say, do you think I should go out with this woman? I'd say, well, what do you think? Because that's what was important. So basically, what I was doing, I was using Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback. Now, if you study the Socratic dialogues, of which there are many, there's several dozen of them, you can get a pretty clear idea what Socrates was doing, where he would bring people to enlightenment by not telling them anything, but by asking the right question.
Mm.
Now, strap that to biofeedback, and you get the same process, but orders of magnitude faster. So I was getting results similar to what a person would get from successful psychotherapy, but orders of magnitude faster, like 100 times faster or 1,000 times faster. So just to give you a frame of reference, for those of you who may not know, let's say a guy can't get along with his family. So he goes into therapy, right? And he sees a psychologist, guy who has a PhD in psychology, once a week for an hour for a year, right? That's pretty much how it goes.
Mm.
So at the end of the year, he is getting along better with his family. I could do that in 20 minutes, 30 minutes because of biofeedback. Because you see, when the client came to me, first thing I would do is interview him. I do a long interview, and he was connected to the biofeedback. So as he was talking, I was getting reactions. I said, well, how do you get along with your father? Fine. No reaction. How do you get along with your mother? Boom. The meter reacts on that. That tells me something. So then we would get into the session. I'd say, tell me about your relationship with your mother. Boom, same reaction. But then I could parse it because different emotional responses have different electromagnetic phenomena connected with them. And I could read them on the meter. So I could see, this guy is keeping a secret from his mother. I would see it in the biofeedback. And I would ask him, do you have a secret from your mother? How did you know? Well, tell me. See? And because of that, I could go right down to the subconscious, dig the whole thing up. In 15 minutes, he's remembering what happened when he was 5 years old, blah, 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 blah. He has a big epiphany. See? That was like normal textbook work for me.
Mm.
So this is sort of going back to answering your question because the reason that I was able to spot these phenomena is that for me, it happened so fast that I could see it unfold right in front of me. You ever see time-lapse photography?
Yep.
Right? They show a flower, right? The flower, instead of it taking 2 months, in 15 seconds, it goes whoop. That's what this was like. It was like time-lapse photography. So I could see the phenomena clearly. And then I would write it down. So by 1995, I had actually observed and recorded about 32 scales. In other words, the client who's at this level goes up to this. The client on this other scale is at this level, he goes up to that. And then, of course, again, I would see it in life. Now, in life, I would not only see people going up, I'd see them going down too. So in 95, I now had this body of data, reliable scientific data. Nobody knew about it but I. And I was pondering a particular client. Now, I had this scale, which was a 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct. So I was trying to assess this client against this scale. In other words, at what level of the scale is this client? Because once you get that, you have a whole body of understanding about the client. Because if you look at the book, the level has a whole body of data connected with it.
Mm-hmm.
This person at this level does this, and does not do that. You see? So once you spot the person, you have all this. So I spotted it, and what happened was this client was at a level that I had never previously observed for a very specific reason that I can explain if you want.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so since I had never observed it, it wasn't in the scale. Now, as soon as I saw it, I understood the case perfectly. All these dominoes in my mind went, I understand what had been going on with her. And I also knew exactly where to insert it into the scale, the 6-level scale. That was not a question. It was obvious. And when I inserted it, at that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. And I suddenly had all of these interlocking, intersecting, interacting mathematical data about this scale. It wasn't just a scale anymore. It was a whole body of data relative to the scale. And it sort of explained not only what the scale is, but why it is. Because when you see these interlocking phenomena, you see that it cannot be any other way. This is what happens when you study math and to a lesser degree science. You see it a certain way, like you study the formulae for a circle. It's a certain way, and it has to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no arguing with it. Once you get it, like the formula for the volume of a sphere, it's what it is. There's no controversy about that. Once you know what it is, see, you have it at your fingertips whenever you want. That's what this was like. So I should tell you now to explain what I mean by this table. Every one of these 35 scales is expressed in the book in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet, because I was able to evolve or discover the exact table, not just the scale, the whole table, which is what made it a philosophic subject, because there were all these mathematical interlocking factors. Now, several people have said to me, what book is your book like? And I have to say to them in all candor, having gone to school for 28 years, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before, at least on Earth. But each of these 35 scales is expressed in a table that's very similar to the periodic table of elements. Now, can you remember when you first saw the periodic table of elements? Right? You were maybe 12 or 13 or 14, right? Maybe it was when you were in your first chemistry class, right? And you looked at it. So at first blush, it's this big thing. It's got all this data in it. It's a little overwhelming, but it doesn't take long to look at it when you inspect it and see, this makes sense. Hydrogen is 1, helium is 2, lithium is 3, horizontally and vertically. And the more you study it, the more self-evident and axiomatic it becomes. So I was a whiz in chemistry. That was one of my strongest subjects. It's one of the things that got me into engineering school at 16 was my knowledge of chemistry. So, and I had this intimate interrelationship with the periodic table. It's like my mind lived inside of the periodic table. And so whatever came up, I knew exactly what to expect, what it was. Oh, this is inert. Okay, it's one of the inerts. See, that means it's not going to do much. It just, or whatever. So originally, when Mendeleev came up with periodic table, we had 79 elements. Now we have about 50 more, but they're still fit into the same periodic table. Why is that? Because it's axiomatically true. So there are these 35 axes of human phenomena, and each one of them has its own periodic table
Mm.
in the book. You open to the chapter, the first thing you see is that table. So you see not only the scale on the left, but you see all of the data underpinning it. And of course, because each of the 35 is unique, the data underpinning it is unique, the way it fits together. So it's like 35 Chinese puzzles. But it's about things that are necessarily intimate to human life. So when I saw this first scale blossom into not just a scale, but a table, I said, whoa, whatever the hell this is, it has to be natural law because it's got mathematics embedded in it. And anything that has mathematics embedded in it, like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence, is natural law. So then I thought, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other tables that I have are also perhaps 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way. Because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, which is the key here, I studied all of these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went through 7 levels. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I have 32 7-level scales, each about a different aspect of human phenomena that all have math embedded in them. And my next thought was, I never saw anything like this. This must be a new subject. And then my next thought was, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as a human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so they can have this data. Because it's scientific data. It's just like studying algebra or geometry or trigonometry. You know, the data is there. You have 6 trigonometric functions. They're defined. You learn how they're defined, and it's easy to use them. You know, that's what this is like. So I then thought, I'm going to have to write a book. Wasn't anything I was contemplating. So the first draft of the book was finished in December of 95, and I sent it immediately to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had differing responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that told me, knowing how smart these men were, because I knew them all personally, that this was exactly what I thought it was, which was a new subject that people would get. It's not obscure. This is not hard to understand. And the reason it's not hard to understand is it's natural law, like Newton's 3 laws of motion. They're not hard to understand. You know, if you know a little bit of math and a little bit of physics, you learn, Oh, yeah, right. They seem almost obvious. It's like, well, why didn't anybody figure this out before him? Well, the reason Newton figured it out is he was a 25-year-old genius, the father of physics. He was the guy who looked at this and said, ah, I see these three laws of motion. And he wrote them down and gave them to us. That's pretty much what happened here with me. So I then spent the next 25 years of my life writing the book. And the reason for that is first, I had to discover the phenomena. And I pretty much already explained how that happened,
Mhm.
although I did find three more scales while I was writing the book. So there are now 35. Then I had to take this data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now, as an engineer, like all engineers, I'm only interested in results and facts. In the world of engineering, you're never allowed to say, whoops. You can't just have the plane fall out of the sky and say, whoops, I didn't get that one right. Right? You can't have the bridge fall onto you and say, whoops.
Though
That is
it's
what
been said before, shouldn't do it though.
that is why engineering is rigorous. There are all these redundant interlocking factors of error that must be applied to make sure that does not happen. So, for example, if I'm putting up a bridge, we can calculate from the size of the bridge and the average weight of vehicles how much weight this bridge would carry maximally if it were completely full of vehicles, right? That's not the number we use. We add 10% to that. And that is the number that we calculate to as far as the strength of the steel. How many I-beams do we use? The strength of the concrete, all that at that high. So you have to realize I had to create something that would work every time for every person. That's what I was about because I'm an engineer. It took 20 years to do that. Now, the most time consuming factor was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader. Because from the beginning, my intent was to give this to the people of Earth to help them. Because this is astonishingly beneficial. Once you get this data, it's like your whole world changes. Um, so, some version of this book has now existed for 30 years. So I've been watching people get this for 30 years. They get it. You don't have to have a college degree to understand this. You have to be able to read English reasonably well. But I went out of my way to make this easy to comprehend, easy for the average reader to grasp and use. So I very often avoided using words that I would normally use because a lot of people wouldn't know that word, so I use a different word. So I've been watching people get this. So here's what happens. 30 years of experience with this. Guy goes into a bookstore, right? He sees this book, Septemics. Says, what the hell is that? Takes the book down, opens it up. He looks at it. And this is what happens to him. He says, oh, this makes sense. You know why he says that? It's natural law. It's not counterintuitive because it's embedded in nature. All 35 scales exist in nature. I just found them and wrote them down. So that's why, if you are reasonably intelligent and reasonably conscientious, you can grasp STEM subjects because they make sense. You
So
know, it's like not. It's like a lot of things about like if you're reading James Joyce, this can be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Ulysses. It's not like that. It's because it's objective. You were going to say something,
Yeah, I was just going to say, so when someone gets your book and they go through the 35 scales, and I noticed when I was doing some research, you have individual scales and then you have group scales.
right?
And so based upon, I'm assuming you would kind of just go into it saying, I want to work on X, or why is this like this when I'm around someone, or because you have things like motivation, personal influence, belief. The one that struck me was spiritual identity.
Right.
So if I'm going in there and I'm looking at the scale of spiritual identity and I resonate with, say, level 4, how would I move to level 5? Is it just really just understanding where I'm at and then working my way up, or how would I move to that next level?
Okay, so there's several different questions in there.
Yeah.
First of all, the highest level is 1 and the lowest level is 7.
Okay. I had
So
it
if you're
reversed.
level 4, you would want to go to level 3.
Mhm.
Also, I should tell you there are general scales and specific scales. Now, with a general scale, and by the way, the scale of spiritual identity is a general scale,
Yeah.
you find your level, you're done. You can try to move up a level, but it has nothing to do with context. Most of the scales are specific scales, meaning they're context driven. So you mentioned the scale of motivation. You could say, what's my wife's motivation toward me? What's my brother's motivation toward me? What's my next door neighbor's motivation toward me, right? Each one is a different context.
Hmm.
So you get a different answer. So it's a different experience. What I should do now that will really help your listeners is tell you the names of the 35 scales
Okay.
so you'll know what subject matter is addressed in the book. This doesn't take long. As you said, there are individual scales, there are 24 individual scales, and there are 11 group scales. So these are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you a simple example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is the person's motivation. Right? So you're standing at a bus stop and some guy comes up to you and starts talking to you. And you're thinking, what does this guy want? Does he want to borrow a bus fare? Uh, does he need information about the buses? Is he a gay guy who's into me? You don't know. See, there's some motivation there, right? I mean, something made him move.
Hmm.
We all do this all the time. The power of this scale is I have reduced it down to the 7 basic human motivations. Now, you can say there are thousands of possible motivations, but they're just subsets of these. They're different versions. So you'll get a level and it's got 822 versions of it in that level. See, that's like a synonym study.
Hmm.
Okay, so you could take this scale if you wish, and you could ask yourself, what's my wife's motivation toward me? What's my brother's motivation toward me? What's my boss's motivation toward me? What's my girlfriend's motivation toward me? Et cetera, et cetera. And you could do this with everyone you know and everyone you have ever known. If you have enough data about them, every time you find a correct answer, meaning you spot it correctly, you'll have an insight. Oh, that's my boss's motivation. That explains why he does X, Y, and Z. See, now you understand him better. You may not be able to do anything about his motivation, but you can deal with him better because you know what it is.
Hmm.
Because a lot of problems with people are that you have the wrong motivation, you know? So you're dating some girl and you think she loves you. And then you find out later she doesn't. She just wants to get into your pants. Different motivation. So it would help a lot if you knew the motive, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
See, then you could take the same skill and you could reverse the vector and ask, what's my motivation toward Alice? What's my motivation toward Joe? What's my motivation toward Fred? Et cetera, and do this for everyone you know or have ever known. And every time you get it correctly, you will have an insight. So by the time you finish this exercise, depending on how many people you know or people you assess, you're going to have something like 400, 500 insights. So your mind is going to be a lot clearer, especially on the subject of motivation. And you would find that you would be able to spot people's motivations just like that. So a new guy comes into the job, first day at the job. Oh, hello, Alex. Nice to meet you, And within 15 minutes, you know his motivation because you know the skill and you can observe the guy. You have an insight. Who is this person? So that's really useful. Now, let me give you something more specific how this is useful. Let's say you're dating some woman for 3 years and you're thinking about getting married. Big step, right? Wouldn't it make sense to ask yourself, why does this woman want to marry me? Isn't that a reasonable question?
Yeah.
I'm not
That's
saying
true.
to ask the woman. You don't know what you're going to get. But open the book. There's only 7. You're only selecting from a field of 7. You know this woman because you've been hanging out with her for 3 years. And now you study the child. Oh, I can see. She wants to marry me because she loves me. That's level 1, the highest motivation of all. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe if you do this, you say, now that I inspected this in an analytical way, I can see now she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini. I have a 60-foot yacht. I fly my own Learjet. I live in a $15 million condo and I have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation. That's level 4 money.
Hmm.
I'm not judging it. I'm just saying that's what it is. Now, what you do with it is up to you. You might say, okay, not the first woman that wanted to marry me for my money, but this one is pretty, congenial, smart, articulate, pleasant. So I'm going to marry her anyway. That could happen. There are people who marry somebody knowing they're after their money and they live happily ever after. I could give you examples. But maybe that's not what happens. Maybe you're the type of person who says, I don't want to marry a woman who wants me for my money. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself. And you break up. Now, in that latter category, you might think you'd be upset about this, and you would be wrong. You will not. You would be relieved. You would say, thank God I figured this out now. Before I wound up owing her $15,000 a month in alimony. So the reason for that is every time you correctly spot someone, whether it's yourself or another, you have a realization. That is always a pleasant experience. Ah, now I see what's going on with Fred. He's at this level. See, so it's always a pleasant, it doesn't matter whether it's a high level or a low level, it's always a pleasant experience because it's an insight.
Mhm.
So that's how you can use this very easily.
And how would you, so say you have someone who's going through that and they don't want to accept the level they're at. How would you work with them to say, I mean, because you say you don't tell them what level they're at. They read the book, they determine their level. But what if their own biases or ego gets in the way and they're just picking the wrong level? I don't know, they're saying they're a level one when they're really a level three, and they're not.
Well, that is possible.
Mhm,
And that would be somebody who's at or near the bottom of that scale,
mhm,
because it is an established fact that people who the reason why someone is at or near the top of the scale is because he's insightful in that area
mhm,
of the 35. And the reason someone is at or near the bottom of the scale is because he's not insightful in that area. We see this all the time. A famous example is Bill Clinton. Anybody who's been paying attention for the past 40 years knows that Bill Clinton is a smart man. He's a Rhodes Scholar. Listen to him speak.
mhm.
He's a very smart man. And even his opponents and his enemies admitted he was a shrewd politician who knew what he was doing. He was very successful. He got reelected. He had a high approval rate when he left office. On the other hand, everybody knows that he's a serial abuser of women. This is no secret. I'm not telling any tales out of school here. We all know this,
Yep.
right? Go on the internet. There's a vast body of data. Women who sued him, women who said he raped them, blah, 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 blah. So, on the scale of human ability, he is clearly at a high level. I'm not giving any levels, but for example, level 3 on the scale of human ability is expert. You think he's an expert in politics?
Yeah, I would say he was.
Okay, see, that's pretty high up that scale. But let's look at the scale of sexuality. Is he going to be at or near the top of that scale?
No.
No, he's not. He's going to be at some lower level. That's why he had all that trouble. Now, look, Jack Kennedy did the same thing that Bill Clinton did, but he was not a serial abuser of women. He was smart enough and congenial enough and upscale enough to know how to handle them, keep them happy. There's one famous exception that has become known to everybody in recent years. But if you go out with enough women, eventually you're going to get one like that. But but he was a serial Lothario. His wife knew about that. She's not an idiot. She's a smart woman. And they had it worked out and he did his thing. So, but Clinton, he totally screwed it up. He should have, instead of letting the woman sue him, he should have said, "Come here, honey. Here's $250,000. I wish you luck. Take a hike." That's the way to handle it. Not to be sued and to go on the stand and perjure yourself and suborn people to perjury, because that's what he was brought up for by the Senate, right? Those were the two charges.
Yeah, but I mean, you could say he would still be at the same level. We just wouldn't know about it. Our perception would be that he would be at a higher level if we didn't know anything about what he did, but he still did it.
That's a
Yeah.
completely separate issue. All I'm saying is we're talking about a smart man
Yeah.
who on this scale is at a low level, and that's why he screwed it up. Jack Kennedy was clearly at a higher level
Mhm.
and could manage this little circus. You see?
Yeah.
As he was a high. So this goes to your question about how people handle this. So typically what happens is a person knows himself. He looks at it, he reads the chapter, he looks up some words, he thinks about it. He has an epiphany. Ah, I see. I'm at level 4 on this scale. That explains a lot. And he will have a concatenation of realizations, not just one. It'll be like a string of fireworks going off. It might take days for him to figure out all the implications of. So he knows where he is. Now, if it's a person who's at a very low level, it's going to be a very different thing. He's probably going to look at it and say, this is gobbledygook. I don't get this at all, you know. So, for example, let's take someone who's a drug dealer, works for the cartels, murders people, is a drug abuser. This person is going to be at or near the bottom of most of these scales. That's why he's like that.
Mm.
If he were a more upscale person, he wouldn't do that. He'd get a regular job selling insurance or go to law school or whatever, see, like the rest of us. So if I were to speak to such a person, I can't imagine how that would happen. But if I did, he'd say, well, is this book going to help me to make more money? Well, I don't know. Well, I'm not interested. See, because that's all he cares about. So it's not for him.
Mm.
So I have actually calculated from the data in the book that about 50% of the human race wants to improve either oneself or others or both. About half of us. Those are the people for whom this book was written. Whether you want to improve yourself or others, it's for you. So let's say most people have kids and most kids have trouble in school, right? There's a scale of scholarship.
Mm.
So dad sees that little Johnny is having trouble. He's getting C's and D's. He says, Johnny, come here, let me show you this. Well, Johnny's 13. He's in junior high. He can read this book. Dad opens it up and he shows him the scale of scholarship. Well, Johnny knows what scholarship means. He says, what's this? You mean there's a scale of scholarship? Dad says, yeah. Where are you on this scale? Johnny's going to want to know that because he's having a lot of trouble with this. So he's going to look at it. And what's going to happen is in a matter of seconds, I mean like 20, 25, 30 seconds, he will find a bracket. He'll say to dad something like, well, I can see right away. I'm definitely not at level 1, 2, or 3 because that's the top of the scale and I'm not good at this. So he got it down to 4, 5, 6, 7. That says, okay, if you just read the chapter, you can get it exactly because the kid knows who he is, see?
Mm.
And it's described. He gets to a, oh, this describes me exactly. See, I'm at level 5, poor student. Yeah, that's what I am. I'm a poor student. See, this resonates with him. So now dad says, well, you know, using this book, we could move you from level 4 up to level 5 up to level 4. Kid says, you can? Dad says, yeah. Kid says, let's do it. So dad just follows the instructions in the book like a cookbook, moves the kid up to level 4. When the next report card comes out, instead of being C's and D's, it's B's and C's.
Okay.
The relationship between the two just got better because the dad is building a bond with the kid. The kid is now trusting the dad more. And so when the dad says, don't fool around with drugs, the kid says, I'm going to listen to dad because he's a smart guy. See? So it's a beneficial experience. So let's say you have this friend, Oscar. Every time you talk to Oscar, he complains about his wife. Every time. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. I think we're going to get a divorce. You get tired of listening to this after 6 months. So you say, Oscar, let me show you this. Look at this. And you show him the book. And he looks at the scale of relationships. And he's going to say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? You say, yeah. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? Guaranteed Oscar's going to want to know that because you're opening a door for him to have an insight. So he's going to look at it and he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say, well, I can see right away. Levels 1 and 2 have nothing to do with that. So that's the top of the scale and we're having a lot of trouble. That's not even relevant. Okay, fine. So he got it down to 5, 6, 5, 2, 3 through 7. And you say, well, go, just read it and then you'll spot it exactly. So he knows this nightmare he's been living through. He reads, oh, I can see we're at level 5. That's not so good. That's near the bottom. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. And he'll have some specific realizations. That explains when I say X, she says Y. And he will be pleased with this because it's an insight.
Mm.
And you say to him, you could move this relationship from five up to four using the data in the book, and then you'll have a better relationship. See? But before we do that, let me show you something else. And you turn to the scale of sexuality. Well, that's relevant, isn't it? It's his wife. And you say, look at this. It says there's a scale of sexuality. You say, yeah, you don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on this scale? Guaranteed he's going to want to know that. So he's going to look at it, and in a matter of seconds, he's going to say, well, I can see right away. 6 and 7 have nothing to do with me, so it's got to be 1 through 5. Okay, go ahead and read it. You can get it exactly. So he reads it. He says, oh, I see I'm at level 4. This is not hard because it's described in the book. People at level 4 do X, Y, and Z. They're describing me. I'm at level 4. So now, see, that's a realization. But he might also say, strictly hypothetically, he might say, and I can see that Mary, my wife, is at level 5. Oh, that's a problem. Because if you look at that scale, those two levels are incompatible. Doesn't matter how smart they are or how nice they are or how friendly they are. This is not going to work. If she's at 5 and he's at 4, can't work. So, and he'll probably say, let me borrow this book. I want to show Mary this book. And you say, no, don't take my book. Get your own book. So he gets the book. He shows him and says, Mary, look at this. And right now, we don't know what Mary's going to say. Maybe she's dyslexic. Maybe she doesn't read very well. Maybe she's on drugs. We don't know. It's all hypothetical, right? So he shows it to Mary, and she might say, really, you think this is good stuff, huh? Says, yeah, I think we could use this to straighten out our relationship and have a better relationship like it was when we were on our honeymoon. She might say, oh, okay, I'm going to look at this, see? But she might also say, take a hike. I don't want to see your book. Now, if she does that, he's probably going to say, we're done, because she's not even making an effort.
Mm.
And again, don't think he's going to be upset about that. He's going to be relieved. He's going to say, thank God I figured this out instead of wasting another 5 years of my life on this crazy woman. See? And now when he looks for somebody else, he's smarter. He thinks about it differently. He's analytical about it. And he can make choices. So I'll tell you an actual story of my life. I'm a single guy. So a year ago, I met this gorgeous blonde. She looked like a movie star from head to toe. And we were very interested in one another. And we're going through the usual getting to know you routine, right? That happens at the beginning of every relationship. What kind of movies do you like? What kind of restaurants do you like to go to? Do you like sports? Blah, 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 right? There's a lot of stuff like that. So we're having this conversation, and I notice, she's low on this scale. Okay. So we had another conversation. I noticed, she's low on this other scale. Okay. And we had another conversation, same getting to know you stuff. And I noticed, she's low on this other scale. Wait a minute, I said to myself. The light bulb was going on above my head. If I can figure out that this woman is at or near the bottom of 3 scales in this superficial way, without even really knowing her, what that probably means is she's probably at or near the bottom of 8 or 10 or 12 scales. That's somebody who's going to give you a lot of trouble.
Oh, that
So
makes sense.
I could see it. Now, look, we didn't have an argument. We didn't have a disagreement. Nobody was insulted. It was all very pleasant, congenial, typical, what do you want to talk about today? And oh, I saw this nice movie. Next time I saw her, I just went to her and I said, you're a very nice person, but sorry, pass. She was shocked, visibly shocked. You know why? She was so gorgeous and attractive. I'm probably the first guy that ever did that to her. Now, I understand you have fights with people and there's reasons why you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a guy who just says, no thanks,
Mhm.
right? Now, most guys would have jumped right in with both feet and had a train wreck. So I saved myself a fantastic amount of aggravation, money, time, because instead of spending time with this woman where I knew it was going to go nowhere, I was looking for somebody else.
No, and I think that's important too, because like what you mentioned in the beginning, getting the insights of other people, understanding your relationship with them and where things connect, and you know, making those decisions like, no, this really isn't worth my time is important because you're taking care of yourself. And also understanding where you are in the process is important and be able to determine, I don't need this. I need this, or I want this, or I should be this. Maybe that's not the right way, but I'm at a level 4, but I could be better and I want to be a level 3. Let me work on that. And I agree. I would say half the people out there, I mean, I would hope it's a little bit more than 50-50, but there's a good amount of people who really want to make their lives better, take care of things, improve their situation,
And others,
and then others who just don't care and
and what I mean is, they don't not only want to improve their lives, they want to improve
yeah,
their
yeah.
others' lives, the wife's life, the son's life, the mother's life. Because I'm telling you, the way this works is a guy has this data. This is life-changing data. He sees his best friend having difficulty. He says, Joe, let me show you this. Look at this book. I think this can help you. See? So it's a grassroots thing.
Mhm.
It necessarily would occur like that. That's what's going on with this book. So look, if I gave you a case of champagne, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't just drink the whole thing all at once.
No.
You might just take out one bottle for every holiday, birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, right? Or you might have a party and say, everybody come over, we're gonna have a champagne party, and you invite 30 people and you kill the case, right? Like, but you're not gonna do it. That's what this book is like. It's like this big case of champagne that you've got now. Whoa, I've got all this information. And it's very accessible information. So you mentioned something about this, your show, that it's largely about attaining spiritual levels and things like that. So let me tell you how this connects to it.
Okay. Perfect.
So if you go through and study all the scales, you will see that the people who are at or near the top of the scales are spiritually evolved people.
Hmm.
So, for example, a scale of basic purposes, the highest level, level 1, is transcendence. That is the highest purpose of all. So, who would that describe? Jesus, Gautama, Yogananda, right? All those people. So, people who go into monasteries and ashrams and rectories and nunneries and such, they want to transcend. I'm not saying everybody in those places are at that level because you get some conkers in there too. But that is where those people go, right? So St. Francis of Assisi is a perfect example. His father was a rich merchant, and he had every intention of giving his business to Francis. Francis didn't want that. Francis founded the Franciscan order, which is still extant.
Mhm.
He wanted to transcend. The dad didn't understand that. This happens all the time, where the kid's purpose is different from the parent's purpose, and they don't understand. They can't get their brains around it. So let's look at the scale of permeation. Permeation monitors love. The reason why you love someone is because you permeate them. Well, someone who's at a high spiritual level is going to be able to permeate very well. This is a spiritual permeation is the basic activity of a spiritual being. So how do people communicate with angels? 80% of Americans believe in angels.
Mm.
The angel comes and permeates the person. There's no blah, 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 right? It's all telepathic. So somebody who's highly evolved is going to say, there's this angel and he's talking to me, you know? So this is true for pretty much all of these. I mean, I can pick them at random. Like the scale of sexuality. Level one is no need for sex. Well,
Interesting.
think about all of these people who go into religious life. There's no reason they couldn't, get married and have children and all that other stuff, or become a Lothario. I mean, I've known lots and lots of priests, friends of mine, right? Handsome, smart guys. Women would go nuts for these guys. They have no need for it because they're at level one on that scale. You see?
Hmm.
So in a sense, when you are pushing yourself up these scales, you're pushing yourself toward a spiritual life. And I could go through every one of these in detail. At the bottom of the scale are the dregs of society. So I mentioned at level one of the scale of basic purposes, you have Jesus and Gautama and Yogananda. Well, who do you think was at level seven? Adolf Hitler,
Mm.
Pol Pot. So this is really useful both ways, meaning it helps you to find people you don't want to be around, but it also helps you to find people you do want to be around. So you meet some person, and just from talking to this person, you can see that this person is high on this scale, high on this scale, high on this scale, high on this scale. You talk to the person, you can see they're very literate. Well, that's high on the scale of literacy. You talk to the person, you see they're very well educated. That's high in the scale of scholarship, right? You see, this is a charismatic person. That's high on the scale of personal influence. So you're spotting this person at these high levels. You say, this is somebody I want in my life. This person will be of value to me. And so you cultivate the relationship. Now, most of us, more than 90% of us, are high on some levels and low on other levels.
Mhm.
It's not like you're going to find somebody who's high on all these. That's less than 1% of the population. But let's say you find this woman and she's high on 8 or 10 or 12 scales. Marry her. But it doesn't mean she's high on all of them. So she's low on this other scale, right? You know this now because you know the material. So when this comes up, you just tiptoe around it. You don't allow it to ruin the relationship. So I'll give you an example. I have 3 sisters. 2 of them are conservatives and one's a liberal. They're at opposite ends of that spectrum. I
Mhm.
get along great with all of them. Never had a bad word in my life with any of them. You know why? I don't let it be an issue. I just tiptoe around it. So if somebody starts going off, on Donald Trump, I say, well, how is your son? Oh, he's okay. Well, what's he doing now? Oh, he lives in Virginia. Really? Did he buy a house? Yeah, he bought a big house, 4-bedroom house. We're off the subject.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to be these days anyway, with any side of the aisle. I try to do the same thing where it's just I don't want to go down that road.
Right? And remember, there's 35 scales.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a friend of mine. He is fairly low on the scale of equanimity. This is somebody who will get in a fist fight, you know? So I know this. So I'm careful, you know, not to rattle his cage. It's not that we're not friends. I like the guy. We get along great. You know why we get along great? I know what skills he's high on, what skills he's low on. I don't let it be an issue. I just tiptoe around it. So that's normal behavior. Your wife is, for example, low on the scale of control. So when she starts being a control freak, okay, she's low on the scale of control. Level 6 on the scale of control is what the average person calls a control freak.
Hmm.
So maybe she's like that. That doesn't mean she's not a nice person. She's got 50 other nice things about her, you know? So when she says to you, I don't want to see you wear a green shirt. That's not a good color for you. It's okay. That's fine. You just let it go. Don't, when she's not around, you wear the green shirt. You see, you're not going to die on that hill
Yeah.
because you have all these other nice things. See, she's high in the scale of sexuality. She's high in the scale of relationships. She's high in the scale of equanimity. These are all good things to have in a spouse. So now you could give her the book and say, maybe she'll read it and realize that she's at this lower level and move up. And then she's not like that anymore. She goes from level 6 to level 5, and then she's not going to be telling you, you don't wear green shirts. They don't look good for you. She stops doing it. You don't tell her the level. I tell this to everyone. Never give the level of any living person on any scale. Even if they ask you, don't do it. It's counterproductive and unethical. And here's why. Most people don't like to be evaluated.
Hmm.
Like somebody comes to you and says, Jeremy, you would look much better without a beard. All right, there's a lot of people who are going to say, who the hell is this guy to tell me whether or not I look? They take umbrage at it, right? It's evaluating the person. Sometimes you can do that without even intending to do it
Hmm.
inadvertently, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, remember I said, every time you spot a level, you have a realization. That is a positive experience. You don't want to take that away from the person. You want to let him figure it out himself. See? So you give him the book and he says, oh, I see I'm on level 3 on the scale of basic purposes. That explains 50 realizations about all the things it explains in his life. So what he does then, he throws out the other 6. They are not for him. He's at this level. That's what he's about. It's defined clearly in the book. And he'll see himself, and then he will be much more focused in his life. So if somebody tries to get him to do something that would fit with somebody at a different level, he's not going to be upset about it. He's just going to say, no, that's not who I am. He's not going to tell anybody, that's not who I am. That's fine. Like people at level 4 on that scale, what I call the normal, they're very conformist people. If everybody gets an SUV, gets an SUV. If everybody grows a beard, he grows a beard. If everybody shaves the beard, he shaves the beard. They're conformists because they don't want to rock the boat. That's not a bad thing, right? That's how people are at level 4. That's the largest demographic group.
Hmm.
Level 3 is winner. The winner wants to win. I actually know a person, very, very brilliant person. And I spotted early in our relationship that this guy was a winner. If you played a board game with him like Monopoly and he didn't win, boy, did he get upset. I was thinking, this is a smart guy. Why would he get upset because he landed on Park Place and had to give me Monopoly money? Because he wants to win. Very often I would play sports with people. I'm not talking about organized sports. I did that too, but like just basketball in the backyard. I had a hoop. I didn't care who won, who had more points. I was just playing softball with my friends. I didn't even keep score. Oh, you guys won. That's nice. Let's go for a beer.
Hmm.
because that was not what I'm about. Somebody who's at level 3, he wants to win that game. And you can say, it's only a softball game. You're not going to get scouted by the Yankees doing this. See? But that's who he is. So it tells you a lot about that person, what to expect, how that person. So when that person behaves that way, you understand it. You take it in stride. That's what this guy's about. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell. Just you see it, you understand it. It's just like this. If I'm walking down the street, people have flowers in their gardens, right? I say, oh, this guy has chrysanthemums. That's nice. You know, I go a little further. Oh, this guy has roses. That's nice. I know what they are. I know the difference between a rose and a chrysanthemum. Now, every rose is unique and every chrysanthemum is unique, but I can always tell the difference between them. That's what this book is like.
Hmm.
It's not that uniqueness gets in the way. Of course, every person is unique, but you have this data about the person. So let me give you a good way to think about this. Let's say you invite me to your home to see your garden. You find out that I'm into gardening, which is true. And you say, Jim, come and look at my garden. I say, fine. So I show up at Jeremy's house and I go into the garden and I say, oh, Jeremy's got irises, hydrangeas, chrysanthemums, begonias, roses, forget-me-nots, tulips. Now, the reason I can do that is I know a lot about flowers,
Hmm.
right? If you bring some 5-year-old boy into your garden, he's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice.
Mhm.
That's all he knows. He can't advise you which ones need more water, which ones need less, which ones need more shade, which ones need more sun. He doesn't know anything about that, right? Now, most adults are like that little boy about people.
It's true.
They don't know what they're looking at. So, guy works all week. Friday night comes, he gets all cleaned up in his best suit and everything, goes down to a nice bar, in a nice hotel to meet a young lady, right? And there's a girl there. He buys her a drink and they're talking, right? And this guy's thinking to himself, boy, she's pretty and she smells nice. That's the same thing the little kid just said about the flowers. It's shallow, it's
Hmm.
superficial. Now, most guys would say that's enough reason to get her number. She might turn out to be a narcissist. She might turn out to be a drug dealer. She might turn out to have some personality disorder. You see, he doesn't know that. Now, what he can do is if he knows this data, the truth is people tell you their levels. It comes right out of their mouths. So, for example, the scale of thought. One of the levels is identity, thinking and identity. There are people who think in identities. This is the guy who says, all women are the same. All Jews are cheap. All Latinos are overly emotional. They're equating each Latino with every other Latino.
Hmm.
Okay? That is a falsehood because there are always exceptions. So if you see a guy at that level, that's a low level of thought. You don't want somebody at that level of thought. Let's say he finds out you're Irish and he thinks, well, all those Irish are drunks. See? So this is a red flag that the guy thinks in identities.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can do about that. You're not going to be able to talk this guy out of his opinion about Irish people or Italian people or Jewish people or whatever, because he thinks in identities. Now, if he thinks at a higher level, like differentiation, this is the guy who says, well, this guy's Italian and he's like this. And this other guy's Italian and he's like that. He differentiates. See? Or, well, yeah, this guy is, it's true that a lot of Irish people drink, but I know this Irish guy doesn't drink at all. He can differentiate. That's somebody you can talk to.
Yeah.
You can explain things to him because of the level at which he thinks. So this is really valuable information. So this tells you how to select people and how to reject people. So now we talked earlier about you're dating someone, right? And you want to know her motivation, right?
Mhm.
Why does she want to marry me? So let's say you have a car dealership and you need a new salesman. So you start interviewing guys, and it comes right out of this guy's mouth that he's a money motivated person. This is not hard for you to tell because you know the scale. I say, hire him. That's what you want. He gets a percentage for every vehicle he moves. This guy is going to be motivated to sell your cars.
Mhm.
He's not going to be some lackadaisical guy who doesn't really care if he sells them or not. He's going to be out there hammering tongs, getting that money. So you see, same scale, same level, different application.
Can you run into the group scales and how they can be addressed? Because I noticed on there we talked about relationships, but then there was also like life spheres, government, civilization. Is that more just to kind of know your place within your society, or
Well, to tell you the truth, these scales, all of them are very big.
hmm,
The magnitude of the data, the breadth of the data is something that it takes you a while to grasp. For example, there's a scale of civilization in which I explain the exact steps in which a civilization evolves.
hmm,
That is a very big thing.
yeah,
And it happens in a distinct sequence. But it also has a relevant to the person. Because if a person operates at the highest level of that scale, that's a very upscale person. But if a person operates at the lowest level of that scale, not so much. You see, there's a scale of government. So let me tell you something. You turn on the news, the internet, newspaper, you continuously hear about the left and the right, the left and the right, the left and the right, right? Hello,
right.
there's no left or right. There is no such thing. It's made up. It's arbitrary. It's an arbitrary abstraction. It has no basis in reality. It's not left or right.
Hmm,
It's up or down.
I would agree.
So you have governments that are good governments that bring people up and bad governments that push people down. So look at the history of the Soviet Union between 1917 and 1989. How did that work out? Was that government lifting people up or pushing people down?
Pushing
Not hard to figure out if you study it. Take the Third Reich, right? From 1933 to 1945, 12 years. Was that government lifting people up or pushing people down? That's the way to assess it. Look at the United States government. The United States government was a very high level government. It gradually went down over the years. And as it went down, the country got worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay. There is one paragraph in that chapter in which I go through the entire history of the United States and tell you exactly what level on that scale the government was, during what years and until what years, and what happened that caused it to go down to the next level. It's very clear. So instead of, when you try to listen to these people watching the news, it's just gobbledygook. For example, Thomas Paine, who I refer to as the father of the American Revolution. 1775, he wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense.
Mhm.
which was distributed throughout the 13 colonies, and that ignited the revolution. Thomas Paine, in his day, was definitely considered a liberal, unambiguously. Similarly, Thomas Jefferson was a liberal. But if you study those two men and see what they actually did and what they actually say, they wouldn't fit in today's liberals. Today's liberals would kick them out or have them shot for the things that they said and believed. So, you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Uh, it's it's a morass. You know why it's a morass? Because it's not based on natural law. Once you understand this government is at this level, it's very clear because the government is always a reflection of the populace.
Mhm.
This is in the news every day. It's just people don't see it. So look at the government of Somalia. Is this a high scale government? Look at what goes on over there. Okay. So we're going to import these people into the United States, which is a much more upscale government, and we expect them to adapt to it. Lots of luck. Doesn't happen. So, and you see the government saying, oh, we're going to install democracy in this country. You have these people who've been at level 5 for 1,000 years, and you're going to suddenly put them into level 3? Can't be done. You might be able to move them into level 4 because it's the next level up,
Mhm.
but you can't move them into level 3. It's impossible because one of the axioms of this subject is you can never skip a level. You can only move to an adjacent level. This is actually very useful information because once you find the correct level, you know your next level up is that level, not any other. This is why crash diets and crash exercise programs don't work. There has to be a gradient. So these 7 levels are the gradients for the corresponding 35 subjects. I'm giving you the gradients. So these are 35 roadmaps for success. So you find what level you're at, you target yourself for the next one up. And if you make a serious attempt, you will get there. You know why? It's the next level up, right? You're on the 4th floor, right? The coffee machine's on the 3rd floor. You say, go up and get me some coffee. Go right up, comes right? It's the next floor. That was not hard. But if the coffee machine is on the 11th floor, you're not going to get any coffee. So this is what happens with people. If a guy's at level 4 and he targets for 1 or 2, he will fail. It is guaranteed. But if he targets for level 3 from level 4, he will get there. So you see how useful this is. You
And
spot the level and you move the person up to the next level. He has to do it himself, but you can assist him.
yeah, I can see that. And would you recommend a person only focus on one area at a time while they're trying to level up, or could they do multiples? So, say, I don't know, relationships. You mentioned relationships and sexuality and motivation pretty much go hand in hand with like marriage. Would it be beneficial to attack all three if they needed to, or just really focus on whichever one's the lowest?
Okay, let me explain it to you this way. The way to use this is you see there's a problem, a dilemma, a difficulty, a situation, right? And whether it's yours or another's. Let's say your wife is having trouble with work, right? So you want to try to get her to find out which scale is relevant.
Hmm.
So you might look at the scale of control. Is that what's going on? Maybe it isn't. You might want to get her to look at the scale of uh, human ability. That's a big factor in what goes on at work. Does this guy have this ability or not? See? Now, when you find the one that's relevant, she will find the level and she will have a realization. And right there, that problem just was reduced.
Okay.
Now, then you may have to do several different scales. So just let me tell you how to use this. Let's say you have a wife, right? I would recommend find your wife's level on every scale. You know her. Listen, shut up and listen.
Mhm.
And she'll tell you, ah, I see. She's at level 4 on the scale of equanimity. That's not bad. It's also not great. Don't tell her. You might say, have you ever looked at the scale of equanimity? See? And when she looks at it, she might realize she's at level 4 and move herself up to level 3. And then she's more equanimitous,
Mhm.
which is good for the relationship. So for somebody like that, do a complete septemic analysis.
Okay.
And then you will understand that person better than the person understands himself. The other thing is, I gave you the example of the parent with the child who's having difficulty in school.
Mhm.
He uses the scale of scholarship. That's what's relevant. So he uses this one scale. It tells you in the chapter how to make someone a better scholar. It's not vague to me. You just follow the instructions. He becomes a better scholar. Now, how long it takes, how high, there's a lot of variables in there
Oh
because
yeah, of
everybody is
course. There's no quick fix.
right. Now, sometimes there is a quick fix, but I'm saying person to person, it varies a lot.
Mhm.
Also, I should tell you, some of these scales are what I call volatile scales, meaning you can change on them pretty quickly.
Okay.
And others are what I call persistent scales, where you cannot change quickly. For example, the scale of basic purposes. Most humans, and I mean more than 90%, spend an entire lifetime at one level of that scale. So you see some guy, right? You hang out with some guy in high school and you can see, oh, this guy's at level 4. He's a normal. You go to the high school reunion 20 years later, he's still a normal because it's a persistent trait. I'm not saying it's impossible to move on it, but it's a big deal.
Mhm.
It takes a lot to move a person up and it takes a lot to move a person down. So, for example, let's say a guy goes into a Nazi death camp and lives. When he comes out, he's probably going to be the next level down
Mhm.
on a scale of basic purposes. His basic purpose has changed. See? You see this all the time. Guy goes into prison, he comes out 10 years later. He's not the same guy. Now he's interested in drugs and alcohol and women. He wasn't like that before. See? He went down a level as a result of the trauma. But it took 10 years. See? Didn't just happen. Or a famous example is uh, St. Paul. The famous example of he's on the road to Damascus. He was a Roman citizen. His job was to oppress the Christians, right? You've probably heard the story.
Mhm.
And so he's
Yeah.
on the road to Damascus and he sees a light in the sky and a voice says to him, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he's knocked off his horse and he stops being Saul and he becomes St. Paul. He moved up a level. He was at level 2, a leader, and he moved up to transcend and he devoted his life to complete change. You see this. Actually, Oriental philosophy knows about change of polarity. If you look at these scales, 7 of these scales have polarities in them. So if you look at it, it says plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus. And so if you're going to go from a plus to a minus, big deal. You have to reverse your polarity.
Mhm.
And that is very hard. Now, there are different ways of doing it. You might go into therapy for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, you reverse your polarity and you go up to the next level. See, that's not a quick fix. On the other hand, the scale of evaluation, you can watch somebody move on that by the minute.
Okay.
So you've got a friend from, let's say, Australia, right? Never been to a football game, American football game. Never seen it, didn't watch it on TV, doesn't know anything about it. So you've got an extra ticket. You say, look, I got this ticket, very hard to get. Why don't you come with me to the game? Okay, right? Because you're being nice, right? So he sees his first football game. Now, when he walks into the stadium, he's at level 4, which is neutral. He doesn't know anything about it. He doesn't think it's good. He doesn't think it's bad. He doesn't think anything about it, right? So 15 minutes go by, right? And you're watching this game. It's a pretty good game. And so you turn to him and you say, what do you think of this? Right? Now he might say, I could see why people would like this. He went up from 4 to 3. Or he might say, why would anybody want to watch this? In which case he went from 4 to 5. See? Now, if he goes from 4 to 3, by the time he leaves, he might be at level 2. He might say, whoa, this is great. I'm going to sign up for NFL on my computer so I can watch these games in Australia. See? He likes it. So that's the scale of evaluation. It moves pretty quickly, pretty easily. And that's what speakers try to do to you. They try to move you on that scale, right? So you go to see some political event, right? And this guy talks. And when you walk in, you're neutral. You have no opinion at all. I don't know if I'm going to vote for this guy or not. And he talks and he says, oh, okay, this guy makes sense. You go up a level. Now you're interested, see?
Yeah.
So it's very, the variation in this is according to the scale.
Okay. No, and that all makes sense. That's why I was part of my concern was somebody goes through the book and like let's just say there are fours across the board, and then they're like, all right, well, let me work on every single one. But it some things won't change right away, some things will change right away, some things you need to work for. All that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's just the journey that all of us are on.
Right.
You know, some of us have natural talents where we can pick up a piano and be able to play almost instantly, and others of us might spend 20 years trying to do the
Mm-hmm.
basic
That's right.
songs.
That's right.
So that all makes perfect sense. And it's all very interesting. I'm definitely, they said I've been reading into it and then doing some deep dives when you reached out, and I'm definitely going to get the book so I can play with it because it sounds pretty good. I want to try to dig into it a little bit more because I work with clients too, but it's more like from the shamanic side. So we look at the stories that they create about their lives, how
Mm-hmm.
those stories are affecting them. Somewhat similar. We just don't have the scale where we see where they are now, but it's kind of the same thing where I let them talk and let them talk, and then they come to their own realization
Right.
because I don't want to just tell them what I think because
Right.
it might not be right,
That's right.
because I have my own biases or my own insights where I think something could be a certain way, but you don't know a person's whole story, so you got to let them come to that realization.
Even if you're right, you don't want
Yeah.
to tell.
No, yeah, exactly. Because then it's about your opinion, not theirs.
I have to tell you, I worked as a human development engineer for 40 years. And as I was going, I was ferreting out this information. So a guy comes in, I see he's at this level on this scale. I know where he's going. I know he's going to the next level up on that scale.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say that or suggest anything about that. But but it made me better at what I did. Sometimes uh, very often you meet couples, like the wife comes to you for help, but she's got a husband, right? So you sort of meet the husband. Hello, husband. You're working with what? I can see these guys are going to get a divorce.
Mhm.
I can see it. So the wife works with me. She's very happy. Thank you, Jim. I'm doing much better. And 6 months later, I get a letter from her saying, oh, yeah, I divorced Fred. I was just waiting for that shoe to drop. I knew that was going to happen. So this is really beneficial information to have. Because I have to tell you, every person is at some level on every scale.
Mm.
The question is not, does this person appear on this scale? The question is, what level is he at?
Yeah.
So look, you can ignore this data if you choose, but it's much smarter to use it. Think of it this way. When you take your car out on the road, there's all this signage, red light, no U-turn, 35 miles per hour, no left turn, whatever it is, right? You must obey those by law, you must obey the signage. If you don't, you're asking for a lot of trouble. You can have a wreck. You can kill somebody. You can kill yourself. You can have your insurance rates go up. Blah, 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 blah. There's 100 things that can go wrong. Go to jail, right? These scales are just like the signage on the road.
Okay.
So, you come to this place, it says the curve, 35 miles per hour around the curve. Some civil engineer calculated that at some point, you better just go along with it. And that's what this is like. I'm telling you, just like with that beautiful blonde that I met, I could see, yes, she was gorgeous, she was attractive, but this was not where I wanted to go. And I didn't go there. And that's a good thing.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm dealing with a person, sometimes it just comes to me, whoa, this guy's at this level. We're done. I don't say that. I just say, okay, that's very nice. Have a nice day. Goodbye. But I know, so there's no regret and there's no wondering. So let's say you broke up with Gertrude when you were 18. And ever since then, you're wondering, what the hell happened there? Why did we break up? Everything was going to. Well, you have a realization. You know what level yours is. You know what level. Oh, that's why we broke up when I was 18. Because she was at that level on that. Now, that whole little fiasco just goes poof in your mind. You don't think about it anymore because it's not a mystery. You understand what happened and you don't think about it. So I have to tell you, when I was a boy or a young man, this data didn't exist because I haven't figured it out yet. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. Now, for me, that cannot happen, does not happen, will not happen.
Mm.
Because I know what I'm looking at. Like the little kid says, can I have one of your flowers? You say, sure. They take the chrysanthemum. Then they're surprised when they get home, it doesn't have much of a scent. Chrysanthemums don't have much of a scent. Take the rose. The rose has a scent. See? It's the same thing. You want to smell the flower when you go home, take the rose.
And that's one of my questions too before we start wrapping up is you mentioned, the kid and the son or the father and his son. He was looking at the book. He determined what level he was on the scholarship level. What age, I guess, is too young? I mean, is it just based upon the child? If they're 8 years old and can comprehend English very well and can read and understand, would that be an early enough age for them to look at the book?
Well, I'm sure you are aware. There are millions, actually probably billions of people who are not terribly literate.
Mhm.
The truth is, the scale of literacy, the level I call literate is level 4. Most people are below that level. They're either semi-literate, which is 5, or subliterate, which is 6.
Hmm.
So it's not a question of age, it's a question of literacy.
All right.
Like I have a son who was a remarkably good student, won scholarships, very, very high SATs. This kid was really articulate. It freaked people out that he knew the language so well. He could speak like an adult when he was 10. So for him, yeah, I gave him the book. He went right through it. There are people, lots of people who, including people in Congress, okay, who can barely read. Listen to them speak.
Yeah.
They don't know the right words. They don't know the grammar. I mean, it's really interesting to have somebody who's a cabinet member who doesn't know the difference between a gerund and a participle. So some of those people are very well educated and very smart, and some of them are not. The point is, if you know this scale, you know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
So what I say is this book is for anybody who can read English reasonably well. Now, at what age can somebody read English reasonably well? You have millions of people in the ghetto who can never read English reasonably well. They never learn. I mean, look at the education system. It's a train wreck. It's been going downscale for 60 years. So I run into this all the time. You have a guy who's a 40-year-old guy. He can't read this book. He doesn't know the English language well enough to read. I mean, think about this. All of the brilliant minds that came before us, Schopenhauer, Cicero, Shakespeare, there's lots of them. Thomas Aquinas, we have all these writings from them. How many people benefit from them? Very few. You know why? They're not literate. I mean, if you try to read George Washington, which I have, it's not that easy.
Mhm.
Or Shakespeare, lots of luck. I mean, most high school graduates in the United States are not qualified to watch a Shakespearean play. They have no idea what the hell is going on.
Oh, they'd rather watch the movie anyway.
Right. But even if you somehow got them into it, they would just be lost. So, it's a question of if the guy can read English reasonably well and wants to improve either himself or others or both, the book is for him.
Okay.
And that's uh, so I've actually calculated that there are about 1.5 billion people who can speak English, and I estimate that about 1 billion of them can read this book. Now, out of that billion, how many of them are interested in improving themselves and or others? I'd say about half. So the public for this book is 500 million people. Now, if you know anything about the world of nonfiction, in the nonfiction industry, if you sell 10,000 copies, that's a success, as opposed to 500 million. So I have often said, most of the copies of this book will sell after I am deceased.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is this is something people get a hold of this book. I'm not exaggerating. They tell me this. It changes the person's life. It changes the person's personality. It changes the way he thinks about everything. So now he's got this toolbox, this conceptual toolbox that enables him to go forward and deal with people in a very effective way. He's not going to get into some relationship and find out 5 years later, this is not the woman for me. He figures it out in the first 5 weeks, which is good for him, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, it's
But
good
it
for
covers
both
everything.
parties.
It covers everything. It covers business, romance. Uh, Between the 35 scales, it covers everything.
Perfect.
Many readers have said to me, "You've covered everything." And it's just a question of knowing how to use it. So let's say you have some guy working for you and he's not doing a good job. Well, what's his motivation? You might have some big, this guy is at this lower motivation. That's why he's never going to be good on this job. He's not motivated.
Mhm.
See? So it realizes you need to get rid of him and get somebody who's motivated. But maybe that's not what's relevant. Maybe it's about control. Control is a big thing. Everybody controls everybody. I'm controlling you right now by talking to you. So, where is the person on the scale of control? If somebody's at or near the bottom, you don't want them on your team.
Mm.
They're going to make a mess. You want somebody who's pretty good with control. So, there are people who say, don't tell me what to do. That's a level on the scale of control. See? That's a problem.
No, it definitely makes sense, and I think it's definitely worth people looking into for sure. Um, while we start wrapping up though, why don't you tell people where they can find the book, maybe mention the book title again. I will put everything in the show note, but I think even on your website, you offer if someone wants to get it autographed, they can reach out and work with you that way as well too.
Yeah. Well, I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, where you can see what many readers have said about this, what many journalists have written about this, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself, and there's even a pre-recorded audio introduction to Septemics that explains it verbally
Hmm.
in about 15 minutes to a new person. So there's a lot of stuff there. If you go to the website and absorb all that stuff, you're probably going to want to buy the book because it's available hardbound, softbound, and ebook. Needless to say, the ebook is very inexpensive.
Nice.
So for $10, you can change your whole life.
And do you have any other social media pages or any place where people
I
can
pretty
reach out
much
to
just
you
send
or?
everybody to the website because
Okay.
it's well constructed. Everybody says it's really good,
Okay.
explains everything,
Oh
and you
yeah,
get
I went through it. It was very easy to understand.
yeah. So what I do want to say in closing is that the data in this book is vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Hmm.
So you're going to get this, and you're going to have things in your life that you could never figure out. Didn't now you look at it, you got it. Because once you know the phenomena, it's clear to you what's going on. You just didn't know. I mean, imagine some guy trying to figure out the area of a circle without knowing pi r squared. Good luck. That's going to be arduous. But once you give him pi r squared, he just puts the numbers in, done. 3 seconds. And that's what this is like because it's natural law. And that's why it works.
Nice. So yeah, I hope people reach out and at least look into the book. I'll definitely put the website link in the show notes, a link to the book in the show notes as well. That way, if they're interested, they can click and hopefully continue for you. But I had fun, man. This was very interesting. It's not something I ever would have thought about until I heard about it. You know what I mean? It's definitely new, like you said. It's a whole new realm of self-discovery, if anything else. It's very insightful.
Right. It's a new subject.
Sweet. So yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Shaman Stories Podcast. If you have any interest in the services that I provide or the services of my guest, please click the link in the show notes below. Thank you. And until next time, have a good journey.